Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out today, spending some of your valuable time. And so the title was Strategies for Managing the File System Quotas. It's going to be more of a basic introduction, and I really would like to have substituted the word strategies for understanding file system quotas. I think that sort of goes as one of the first requirements before we can manage it. So I think it's going to lean more towards the management or the understanding side of things here. So if you've been working with your quotas already, hopefully this is just a nice refresher. If you haven't really thought about them too much, then I'm trying to unravel what would be the content of the wiki pages. I think I mentioned it in the title of the abstract of this, that if you go back and look at that, everything here that I will say can be found. If you can click on the docs.alliance.ca link and essentially type in quota into the search bar, you'll hit all the pages that I've been looking at. I pulled the information out of, so you can always go back in there and maybe with this presentation, things will just be a little bit easier to pull together when you're looking for something, trying to figure out what's going wrong. Or you can always refer back to these slides. I'm hoping to update them a bit before they get posted. Not everything got done that I wanted in the time that I had. So anyway, just get started. So the topics here are to describe the research file systems that are available to you, and then cover the quota limits that are on them, mainly home, scratch, and project. I'll show you how to determine or change your current quota. We'll cover diagnosing and resolving over quota situations, which probably was the driver for this presentation, because as all the staff, we receive tickets, and it's the most recently, a lot of people have run into this problem. So it's in everybody's interest to get a better understanding of it, as I said. I'll just talk about file transfer options between or within the systems in the context of the quota. Some best practices for storing large or many small files, and talk about the temporary node local storage that you might use for queue jobs, and mention some options for long-term storage. So all these items are related to the different file systems. So let's see how they sort of all relate together and connect to not only the hardware that we have, but the sort of the quotas that you're assigned by default, or the ones that you request. Quotas can be applied per user, or they can be applied per group. So it's kind of the first thing to get straight. And the per user quotas occur on the home file system and the scratch file system. So home is what you get when you log in to any cluster. And you know that all the homes on the different clusters are different. They're different systems, and they're not mirrored in any sense. So all the files are different on each home that you have, and each scratch that you have, etc. for each cluster. So home, the appropriate use of home is for basically small files, source code, job script. These are small files, programs that you want to install sort of centrally in your account. So everything's sitting there available to you. Maybe the most things that you use the most that are not really related to high performance computing for running jobs, because when you're running jobs, you don't want data to be touching home, because everybody shares home. And that can be very disruptive if the home servers get overloaded. So the next per user quota file system is Scratch. This one is appropriate for large files, roughly more than 100 megabytes, for doing checkpoints, writing job output as the job runs. And this file system is purged. Your home account, of course, is not purged. So they have very different sort of attributes associated with them for your usage. So, and the quotas, because they're per user, you're entirely accountable for maintaining the quota. So it's only the files that you put into these file systems that will act to go over quota. And of course, when you don't want to go over quota, because that can cause problems, especially in home, because jobs may not be able to be submitted because the queue Slurm has to write quite frequently small temporary files or things that you may not be aware of. And home should have some space on it for that to work properly. So you always want to be, before you're running jobs or working, being sure you're within quota on those two, and they should stay within quota. So the next one is quotas that are applied per group. So these file systems include project and Nearline. You're able, what I mean by the project, the group quota, is that you're sharing this quota with a group of other researchers, and you're assigned a directory under your project's subdirectory, which occurs in your home account. And that's where the files go, and that's where the quota is applied. And we'll look at that a little more closer. So the quota under projects, they allow you to create larger quotas by request. And they're organized. These quotas are actually attached to your PI. So once again, it's shared with other members of the group. Project is for long-term store, ideally. There's a comment, pretty strong comment in the wiki about this, that changing files frequently on project is not recommended because due to the fact that project does take backup quite a bit, and this can put a stress on the tape backup system. So if you're going to be running jobs and have a lot of activity as jobs run, it's best to use Scratch, so you're not treating project as Scratch per se. So once the other file system, which has per group quotas, is Nearline, and this allows you to archive your data to tape for longer term storage, or really archival storage. This could be many months. Going back to the project file system, essentially files on there should not be changing what they recommend more than like a couple times a month. So if you're changing a file like 1,000 times a month, then that's not appropriate. So project, very, very low usage as far as changing the files go. But some files that sit there on project for a long time, they're starting to take up very valuable space in your quota. So that's why you want to archive them off to Nearline. And as mentioned here, Nearline itself, it has some not only per group quotas, but when you go to move the files into Nearline, they should be fairly large. Well, medium-sized tarballs, called it. They can get much bigger. But so the range would be 10 gigabytes to a terabyte is recommended. So if you've got a lot of files on project, then there's tools that you can use to tar it up into tarballs that are of this size. Number of files that you're permitted in your quota for Nearline is much lower. That's reflected because you're only putting very few tarballs into there. There's another file system which is really neither per user or per group. usage, and it's essentially limited. You're using it when you run a job in the queue. It will write to this disk that's right on the node where the job is running. And that's very fast access because it's not over the network. And the directory is pointed to with the slurm tempter variable. And this is really good for small files. So if you're writing them repeatedly, reading them, deleting them, well, you might be tempted on Scratch to put all your small files there. If you really want the performance, then go after the slurm tempter, because notice back above there, Scratch is recommended for larger files greater than 100 megabyte. So this can really impact how fast the job runs. I mean, that you use the correct file system according to the size of the files. It's different on all compute nodes. The different clusters, there's a table in the wiki page which shows what it is, but it's somewhere around 500 gigs. If you reserve a full node, you get the full space of this tempter. And if you're sharing the node with somebody else, you're getting fractional amount of that space. But the total space is not really that large. It's around 500 gigs or 800 gigs in that region. So if you need a lot more space, then you have no choice. Then you're going to need to use Scratch. Python virtual environments are mentioned because this generates lots of files, and if you want to get good performance, then you need a fast file system. So the slurm tempter is ideal for that, and a lot of people are using Python, so it's really you've probably seen it in your Python startup instructions, I suppose, already if you're a Python user. So those are I guess the file systems to start thinking about in an organized fashion. Now we'll just go to what are the actual quotas on the different systems. So when you get your account, you get a home on each cluster, and each one has about 50 gigs and 500 and allows for 500,000 files, and that's fixed. It is surprising how quickly you can fill up both of those. And again, you don't want home ever to fill up to the maximum because it can impact jobs that you submit to the queue. Then Scratch gives you a default of 20 terabytes and 1 million files. And again, these are per user, so you're solely responsible for filling those file systems up. Nobody else can do that because you're the only one that has access to it. And now for the two group quoted file systems, project gives you default of 1 terabyte and again 500K files, and this is for your whole group. So that means that anybody in the group can overfill the limit, and suddenly you can be over quota on the file system. So yeah, so you can increase this 1 terabyte and this default value of 1 terabyte and 500,000 through a RAS request, which is fast. It's the idea, and it can be increased up to 10 terabytes and 3 million files if you need it. If that still doesn't work, then before going for a rack, everybody should look at whether or not you're removing files appropriately. You're not storing things you shouldn't be. You really need all those files on the system, because to go to the rack step, you're going to have to submit a proposal and everything and justify why this is happening. So all those things will be requested to be checked. So if you've got somebody has a pile of files sitting around on the file system, then for a long time, that's not going to look very good in your rack proposal if it's checked. Next file system is Nearline. It has a separate quota on it. Again, it's a group quota. So the default's 10 terabytes and 5,000 files. And again, these are large files that you're going to pack up your files into tarballs to put onto that. And it can be increased as well for long-term storage. just the meaning there, the terminology RAS, Rapid Access Service, and RAC, Resource Allocation Competition. Again, just put it in the quote search bar and it'll take you to the right place if you want to start one of those processes because you're hitting the edge of the quotas on Scratch, Project, or Nearline. Again, home is what it is. You're stuck with that and you have to work within it. But as the introduction showed, you probably wouldn't really create that many files for your programs. And if you're trying to compile something really huge, it'd still be a bit of a stretch to get to that point. And again, the same thing applies, keeping only what files are necessary. When you're done with them, get rid of the thing that you unpacked, maybe just keep the original tarball or zip file or whatever it is that you had to keep that nice and cleaned up. Because all this stuff, and very quickly, once you go to the next thing you're doing, you'll forget what it was and you may be hesitant to remove things. So it's good practice to constantly clean up after yourself as you move along. So the next question is, now that you know the quotas and the different file systems, then it's time to ask, what are you currently using and how do you determine that? So there's a command available on all the clusters that you just type in and run disk usage report, and it'll turn up something like this. And it shows the quota limits that were just on the previous slide. So, well, slightly different. Home 53 gigs, that's actually correct. So previous 50 gig was a little low. You got your 500,000 files of home. Scratch showing here is still at the default. I'll just skip this next line, the third line down, skip it. Here we've got your project quota for your group. Everybody gets, every PI or professor, when the accounts are created, everybody in the group has this default account called def- username of the professor. So I just called it prof there. So this is the quota that the group that you're working within for the default. And here it says 10 terabytes and 500,000. There's another line at the bottom, project for the RG for the professor. And this indicates that this doesn't occur by default, but the group has requested has applied for research for research groups RAC award, and now has additional space for a different research group, which could be different from the default group in the line previous to it, and they'll have access to the storage. So 30 terabytes and 10 million files for this project. There's, whenever you run the disk usage report command, you get this comment on some clusters. A breakdown per user may be available by adding the per user option. And that can give more detail than what's printed here for individuals in the group. This minor detail is, well, maybe not so minor. Number of files column also includes things like directories and symlinks besides just files. The behavior of the disk usage command is different on the different clusters at the present time. If you log into Narwhal and Beluga, you'll get one that produces a Nearline quota result in it. Okay, so this gives in the project file systems, this is giving the quota that's shared by the group. So the next question is, how much How much am I using? Oh, right. So this somebody's noticed that here contains a slight problem. I skipped over that middle line, sort of intentionally. This line is showing on Cedar and Graham. It's now gone from Beluga and Narwhal, but it's nonetheless sort of useful because what is it indicating? Well, it's indicating that you've exceeded a quota of 20, this very small space quota of 2048K on project. So essentially, and these are files that have the group, which is your username on it, instead of the group of the project that you're under. So if you're under project def, your professor, then the group of all the files should be the same. And that's ensured by the group ID attached on the directories. So the 325 gigs there is just indicating that somehow somebody copied files under project and they did something that did not allow the group ID to be set according to whatever project they're within. So it retains sort of the default group ID that would be present in your home directory. So that needs to be fixed. And that is one of the problems that people are running into because now that you're over quotas, you go to do something and you can't write a file. And there's a number of those files, 889 of them. So they need to be cleaned up here. This is explained how to do this in the wiki page. So I'm just gonna get started with it here and jump over to the actual wiki page that discusses it because there's more detail. I can't really summarize it here. If you want to determine the project usage by the user, so then there's a command LFS quota for -u, which is a switch for the user. And then the environment variable user in your account is your username. So this command is going to look for it's going to look for the files under project that belong to you. And it's going to report that back. So therefore, you know what portion of files, and this is under all projects that are on project. So everything, the default one, any of the rack projects that you've got, everything, it's a total of files that you own. Okay, and we can also count the number of files that you have in a certain directory using this LFS command. LFS command is, there's many ways to count files on the file system, but because it's a Lustre file system, all these are Lustre file systems. Mostly home on Graham isn't, so it doesn't work there, but everything else is. It runs very fast, so it'll run the find command very fast compared to just running find without using LFS in front of it. So this command will look into a directory. This is just an example of a directory there, projects depth PI, your username. It could be some further down subdirectory, and it'll just count the number of files it finds. So you can, that's how you can count files. Quite frequently you want to do that. Just a quick demo of how to exceed the quota. Not that it's not the ideal outcome. So let's go back to here to investigate. I think my terminal died. All right. So let's go into projects. Oh, wait. I'm just going to run this on my account to see where things are at. So at this moment, I myself have a few files that are owned by myself under project with, I have the group ID of myself, of my ID attached to them, which I'm trying to track down right now. And so if you run this command, you may see zeros there, which would be ideal, so you won't have any files under project. So this is the default project that I have. I don't have any rack projects there, which are links. It's worth looking at what's going on with these links in this project directory, so that you see that they point to directories under project. So they're symbolic links to projects, to numerically named project directories under project. So other users with the same def user ID or def-professor would also have a link that points into the same one. So I've got a directory called Polyflow here, which is just some program. And notice that it's got my user ID, and for the group, it's got my username again. So I own it, and it's not part of the of any default group. So the problem that can occur when I want to copy this into project, because currently this is under home. I'm in home right now. So I want to copy this directory under project, and so the typical so when I look here, this directory is owned by the group def under Robert PJ. So if I try to copy this, well, let's say rsync it, sort of naively, from your home directory to here, then give it a second. So I've hit the problem. So just trying to copy the directory, I've gone over quota. And if I look at the quota command, that middle line has now got a lot more files in it. It's bigger, and it's got more files than it had before. I think it said six there. So this is reporting that under project, I've got additional files with the group ID Robert PJ, and that's because I use the archival option for rsync. And indeed, you can see this Polyflow directory doesn't have def Robert PJ. It's got Robert PJ for the group name. And respectively, all the files in here likewise do. So it would be better to let's get rid of it, and let's try to do it again so that we do it the right way the first time. So this is covered in, I'm going to show you the wiki page where to find the solution to this. So it is on the one. You can type this into the search bar. It should get to it. Okay, so this is going to show you how to fix it. I've actually removed the files already. So what I wanted to do was how to transfer. We can fix it as well as part B, but let's try to transfer it properly in the first place. So that would be better, generally speaking. So transferring data wiki page gives some suggestions on how to use. It gives a little talk about, again, this disk quote exceeded message. And it shows you how to remove the group perm from the rsync archival switch here when you copy. So rsync can be used on the same system, like to copy files, or you could use it between systems, and this would still apply. There's another page. Here. So the other page, yeah, back to the FAQ. It talks about it. So it's even got a section exactly for this situations. So moving files from between Scratch and home file systems. There's that. Scratch and home, project to Scratch or home. All right, so I'm going to do it. We can use this, or we can go back to the transferring data one. So this command here should solve my problem. So when I do it this time, so let's, so it's still going. Last time it had already died because it exceeded the quota. And so now the permissions on the directory is group. It's the proper group ownership of the directory and the files, all of them inside. Anyway, so everything in every subdirectory will have those proper permissions. And then as a result, if you go back and look at your quota, after this file transfer, it's back to where it was. So nothing changed this time. So this is what it was originally. There's some 6 files in there and 125K. So all the quota is now, if I captured it just before I did this, the quota would have increased here for the files that were copied. So just under a gig. So that's on how to do it right the first time. And there's other analogs there when you use the CP command. It's got a -A switch, so that will cause the same problem. So you could use CP -R if you're copying a directory with a lot of subdirectories, If you're just copying the contents of a directory itself, you've already created the directory, then you don't need any switch at all, just this wildcard to copy the files. So CP *dot will copy the files to your current directory. CP, the directory name *. So now, now let's redo let's go back and get rid of the directory, and then I'm going to again, I'll do it this time with CP. I think I used rsync the first time. I should get the same thing if I do it the wrong way again. Well, it seems that seems to have completed. I'm not sure what it did though. It didn't complain. So there was no complaints this time. rsync complained, and that was a clear indicator that, oh, I did something wrong. I didn't finish. Now I just copied these files and it seemed to work because there's no error message. That can lead you into, so you might not even know that you did the mistake. And if you didn't check your quota after you copied the files to make sure things were, there was nothing showing up here, and the files indeed went here, then you might think that it actually worked, which it didn't. So that's pretty dangerous when you're doing a lot of stuff, moving really quickly, and then go to run a job and suddenly you're over quota. And that will appear maybe in the output of the job because it can't write a file. So you start scratching your head, why is it like this? And maybe it was yesterday that you copied these files in there. And sometimes it'll let you copy a few more, or maybe even get your job submitted, and you still just don't know that the problem is there. So that demonstrates that. So now you may not know where these files are located. So you could have, like, thousands and thousands of directories, and maybe you did it in one of the directories and you can't possibly find it, like just remembering and poking around. So that you need to use a procedure. And that, again, now we can go back to how to fix the problem. This is on the FAQ page. Again, just quoted exceeded error. You could maybe something to write down. That's something to write down out of this. So we can try to find the files. Let's try to locate where those files are that have the wrong, that have the group ownership, my username there. So if I put this, oops, not that one. So again, we're going to use the LFS command because it's very fast. Run a Lustre file system with find. We're looking for the files that are owned by the group with my username, so they shouldn't be on project. Oh, I've done something not good here. I could have done something much better, and I should just break out of this. Probably. So I should be on a DTN node. I believe that's going to work even faster for this search. Not sure if what's happening on this login node. It could be busy. It could be a lot of people on here. So there's my other terminal. I had gray-DTN. So that's a lesson there too. If you're transferring data onto Graham or other clusters, you want to do that, well, either with Globus, with rsync, you could SFTP them, whatnot. If you have a large number of files, a lot of small files that need fast access to write the data, then your best bet is on a data transfer node. So we should log into that to do those things, or else you'll pay the price waiting a lot longer. I don't know, maybe 50 twice as long, 3 times as long, potentially. It really depends what's going on in the login nodes. It's, I mean, even if the login nodes are idle, this DTN node should beat it. But it can make a significant difference. So it's a good habit to get into when you're moving data around, to use data transfer nodes. Yeah, so instead of logging into Graham, you just log into gray-DTN with that your SSH. Oh, there's got to be a type in Graham, and because this is specific to each cluster, or it gives you your name there. So if you want to connect into the data transfer node, that's it there. It also tells you the Globus endpoint. And this is like the regular log node that your user is used to connecting into. And it's giving some summaries here of specifics for home Scratch project overall sizes. If you go back to the wiki page, just while I'm thinking about it, where it talks about the quotas for the different file system, I've created a summary of this first two columns here on my wiki page, but this one shows that they're cluster specific. See these tabs? So Graham is 10 terabytes default on Nearline, 5,000 files. Cedar's 2, and Beluga and Narwhal only 1. So that's something to be aware of. And kind of like that's kind of like related to this DTN. The naming of the DTN node is cluster specific. So if I type in Cedar, I just got the unstable message. Maybe they don't have one. Let's do Beluga or Narwhal. Okay, so it's not there. I don't want to waste more time in that. I'll put it in revised slide. How's that? All right, so go back to this. I was searching for the files and it found some files. Indeed, it found my polyflow directory. It's identified that. So it found the files which have the group ID problem. So now I could either delete them and copy it all again, but that's not a good use of bandwidth. And maybe there's too many files to do it with. So you go back to this page, how to fix the problem. And so probably something, I mean, one thing that could have occurred was that so here, this one I would have done first. The group ID is what I was trying to say. So it's possible that it occurred not because you used the archival option, but because this set group ID bit on the directories is not, if you look at a directory, indicated by the S. Oh, wait. Right. So on the S is set on the parent directory. So this is the group ID bit. So if for some reason the bit on each directory is not set, then even if you try to copy the files in, doing it the right way without trying to archive them to retain those perms, the original ones, then it won't set it because that's required. So that could be one problem. So this just recommends going through your whole account and changing that on every single directory. But if you know that you just ran the command the wrong way, like I did it, then you don't need to go through that, because that can be kind of time consuming, especially when I got like 400,000 directories. It's going to take a long time to run that because each one has to be touched and changed by this chmod command at the end there. That's what does it. Finds all the directories and chmods them to the correct perm. So I don't need to do that. Instead, I can run this command and change it to my default group on everything in polyflow so that it's got the proper, it will alleviate the problem with the quota. So the quota will that issue will disappear. So I'll just copy this command. And because I know where the directory is, I'm not professor, but I am, because I'm staff, I have my own, I'm like professor kind of. You would be putting in your actual professor's default group there. And then I'm going to tell it exactly, because now I know where the directory is that has the problem. I'm just going to tell it to do that directory and not to go through everything, because you'll be there for, who knows, even though if we're on grade DTN, could be there a very long time. So just copy paste that into there and let's give it a go. Oh, I guess it should be okay. All right, so let's go back into there, see what happened. Yes, so wait. So I just display the tree, the directory tree, and all the perms just to check. You know, sort of scroll through things. Things look much better now. So I've done it. And now I check the quota command. Notice how fast that was. That was like almost a gig of files that were ripped through. I'm back to where it was in the very beginning, which again, I wish was 0 and 0, but we're trying to get that fixed. Could be some files or somewhere else on project other than in my account. So somebody else has some files that are owned by me in their directory. That's what they're looking for right now. And once that happens and those are cleaned up, those will be down to 0. I mean, this topic goes on. There's other considerations which are covered in excellent detail in the wiki, such as copying files between users and groups, and I mean, we've talked about file directory permissions and things. There's also a FACL command for handling permissions that can be convenient if you're just transferring a single file to a colleague.